Watch this. No way!
Bruce, welcome.
Good to be here.
And delighted to welcome John Simpson to the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast. John, we're amongst royalty today.
Oh, I wish. No, lovely to have you here, fellas.
Well,
Great.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely thing to do on an evening. Thank you so much for having us around to your home. I don't know how many podcasts we've recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. From a guest's home, I think this might be a first. We feel particularly honoured.
It always puts you on the back foot as well, doesn't it? Because you never know whether to take your shoes off, what the etiquette is. We were just talking about spilling spaghetti on the floor and stuff. But no, real pleasure to have you on the podcast. John, for people who might not have heard of you, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, firstly, I suppose I was golf-wise. I was at IMG for 20 years and managed some brilliant golfers in my time. Nick Faldo and Greg Norman, Bernhard Langer, Vijay Singh and a few others, Sandy Lyle, Ian Woosnam, and created quite a few events with them as well when we were there. And a great time. That was my working side and enjoyed it immensely. And from there, I started the On Course Foundation in 2010 and then in 2012 in America, which takes up my time now. And I must say I'm enjoying every minute of it. And that's the charity I'm sure we'll talk about, which teaches golf to injured servicemen and women.
So, and I mean, that's pretty much flat out at the moment. That's your sole project now since retirement, right? You haven't kept any other, that's like the sort of sole focus. When we come through, you're talking to us about it. The plans ahead there are just absolutely staggering, aren't they?
Very much so, yeah. Well, it all kicked off when I played golf at Royal Wimbledon with a chap that said he would like, if I would, to go and speak to his people. And I wasn't too sure who it was and what his people was, but it turned out he worked at Headley Court, the British military rehab centre in those days. And when I went down there and saw how many numbers of injured personnel there were, and really what an awful mess a lot of them were in, I just thought, being disabled myself and what golf did for me, I just felt really confident that we could do the same with them and start this charity and teach them golf on a long-term basis and with the idea of getting them into employment. So part of the strategy, we teach them the etiquette and the rules and the history of the game so that they can get into employment if they want to later on.
And you mentioned there that you were disabled. So I guess, in terms of when that happened to you as an age, you lost your left leg.
No, I've got my leg. Unless I'm missing, I'll take a quick look. Hold on. No, I think it's still there. Luckily.
Help me out, John.
Yeah. So basically, when I was 2 years old, and in the 50s, they had the sugar lumps for polio and everything, which I'd had, but there's a lot of strange viruses going around with polio. And it was, it was killing a lot of people and doing some, it was a dreadful, thank goodness it's not around now. But I fell over on my second birthday and cut my chin open and needed stitches. And there was an epidemic in the hospital and it all comes in through the throat. And so I was a pretty bad way. And, I think before my parents died, they told me that they couldn't come and see me because it was so infectious and everything. And they actually were told to come in one evening because they didn't think I was going to make it.
Really?
Seriously. So, but, I was very lucky. It just left me with a very, weak left leg, which then when I was 13/14, they said they would like to take me in and sort of do some operations that would put me in good stead for the rest of my life. Looking back into surgeons that I've met subsequently and friends, they probably did a wee bit too much. And anyway, the first operation was not successful, which meant I had to do a second one. And in those days, it wasn't sort of going in and getting you out of hospital as quick as possible. I think I was there with all this going on in and out for nearly a year.
No way,
yeah,
really,
so
as a
it was
kid?
long time, especially after the second operation, which was then successful.
Yeah.
And I had to, they said, this looks really good. You must really work hard on your physio. And, I'm sure you'll be back playing sport and all this good stuff. But cutting a long story short, I walked into the hospital the first day, and there was a double door, and somebody had washed the floor on the surface, and the sign, "Be careful of the wet," was on the other side of the other door. And my crutches went, and because I'd been in a plaster for 8 months or whatever, and I had some horrific breaks of that leg with a compound fracture and all that good stuff, which didn't do me any good. Hence, from there on in, I had to wear a brace and, get on with things. And that's really what I learnt very early on, that you can feel sorry for yourself and you can ask all these questions, why me? Or you can accept that it's happened and just get on and do the very best you can. And that's hopefully what I've done and what I instill in the guys and girls that join on course.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I've heard you tell a really inspiring story elsewhere, John, about how your father introduced you to the game.
So yes, it was. I got a few little, odd clubs, and had a couple of lessons. And I was so conscious. I remember it was a hot summer, and I was 14. Or nearly 15, and I was so conscious of the fact I couldn't walk properly, and it hurt like hell. And literally, I would hide behind the caddy shack and hit shots, and almost fall over going right ways, straight down on the deck when you take a backswing.
Yeah.
All the sort of comic stuff, but it actually happened. And then he said he'd like me to meet a doctor friend of his called George Keogh.
And whereabouts was this? Where
This
were
is
you
in
playing
Kent,
your golf? Okay.
Near Royal St George's, where I'm a member now, but I was then at North Foreland learning the game.
Yeah,
there.
great par 3 course. I had a lovely
that's
day
where
there.
I've learnt my
Had a
golf.
wonderful day there the other day playing the par 3.
Isn't it brilliant?
I had gout. Now, it's not as bad as what you were talking about. I had gout that morning, and I was so desperate to go and see the par 3 course. I said, "Come on, Tom, we'll still get round with a wedge." And it was just brilliant views, isn't it?
And
it's
a great way of
lovely.
learning golf, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
All the shots.
Great.
Anyway, so all of a sudden, I'm behind the caddy shack. Cutting a long story short, there's a John bellowing from the first tee. I thought, oh my goodness me. And I turned around and it was George Keogh, it turns out. And he said, "I'm a friend of your dad. Come on, let's play 3 holes. I hadn't been on the golf course at this stage. So begrudgingly, I went up. He was very good, by the way. He was off 7 handicap or 6. He had a huge drive down, and I took, off the first, I took 3 shots to get to his drive.
Really?
Okay.
And he turned to me, and he's a powerful-looking guy. And he said to me, "John, if you want to play this game, you've got to walk quicker than that." And I said, "But my leg hurts. I've just had these operations. It's rubbing me." He said, "Stop. Come on, just get on with it." Second hole, I'm struggling. We've only got 3 holes to play. And he said, "Unless you keep up with me, go straight back to the clubhouse because it's not worth playing."
Really?
And I said, "Where's my father?" Any guy would nail him or do something. I just couldn't believe. And I said, "Well, I'm not going to crack up and cry," but I just couldn't believe that someone could do that. So forget the golf. I just kept up with him all the way. And he waited. We went into the changing room, and he didn't say much to me. And he waited till everybody left. And he took his trousers down, and he had one below-knee amputation, and the other leg was so awful I couldn't even look at it. Yeah, and he had the military cross before he was a doctor, and he jumped out of a plane in Italy somewhere and got shot 3 times in his good leg, and then made sure he landed with his one leg that hadn't been injured, and he landed on a landmine. Never saw that leg, and then became a doctor after all that. And I just thought it was such an inspiration with my father, obviously, and my mother, who were brilliant to me and let me just get on with things. And having George Keogh put me on the right road, saying, "No," and he said to me, "Never, ever complain about your leg because nobody wants to hear about it."
Wow.
And he was right.
Did that feel like a bit of a watershed moment for you?
Yes, very
You're
much
sort of
so.
at that point of being really impressionable, I guess,
Yes.
as a character, and it just leaves you feeling like, I guess it's quite inspirational. Really.
Very much so. And I think the other was looking back as a parent. Soon after that, we had some, I don't remember exactly, but we're at the house, and I had some friends round, and they jumped on this 8-foot wall, which is, about 2 feet wide, or maybe 1.5 feet, whatever. So I said, I can do that. And I jumped up and started walking, and I could see my parents looking at me, and my mother, I'm sure, saying to my father, who was called, his nickname was Simmy, you've got to, and they both managed to do nothing and let me do it. Now, I don't know whether I could have done that as a parent, because I only can imagine what would happen if I'd fallen off that wall with that leg. It would be, horrific. But took some guts from them.
Absolutely.
And another watershed moment for me, realizing, looking back, that just letting me get on with it, was pretty impressive.
It's hard, isn't it? Like, I'm a parent, I've got a 3-year-old boy, and I watch him do things, and I saw one of those things online, Jordan Peterson talks a lot about, psychology, etc., and says, you almost, the best state to leave children doing something is when they're in danger, but they're carefully going about it, and they're aware. That's the point where they learn. Not when they're being reckless and when they're clearly, you wouldn't let them play in the middle of the road, but having the restraint to let them be in a position of danger, but be there and be present and careful and stuff. That's like a really key point of learning, apparently, for kids. I don't know,
it makes sense.
Truth in
Makes
that.
sense.
Yeah, it's that stoic resilience that you almost mentioned earlier, though, John. It's like you kind of have two options available to yourself there. You can feel sorry for yourself, or you can just say, no, you know what? I've had some real bad luck, but I'm going to go and make the best of this. And I guess that's one of the, just bringing it back to the on-course foundation, that's probably one of the great appealing things about golf, is that we have a handicap system, and even irrespective of that, it's a sport where there's so many different skills. It's not just about hitting the ball a long way. Okay, clearly that helps, but there's putting, there's a short game, there's plotting your way around a course. And I imagine, with people of a military background who've come from somewhere of great discipline and applying themselves, the sport of golf is really appealing to them for those reasons.
Very much so. And also the fact it's the only game that I know of, golf, that you can play on the level playing field with able-bodied because of the handicap system.
Yeah.
And that's where the confidence comes from.
Yeah.
To eventually go up to someone and, chat with no legs, off, above the knee amputations, and to say to someone, let's go and play golf, what's your handicap? And the guy says 18, what's yours? With no legs, well, 7. Let's go and play.
Yeah.
And the confidence you get from that, and self-esteem, of course.
Yeah.
And that then builds up with the idea of getting a job as well, which is quite important. The job side of it, I think, all sort of falls into place once they get the confidence and, as I said, the self-esteem.
And that love from the game, I guess. I mean, is that something that, just circling back to your story there, John, is it you kind of developed the love from the game from the age of sort of 13 or 14 by the sounds of things, playing at North Foreland? Did you play quite keenly and competitively then, and when did you decide that it was something that you might like to kind of go into as a career, really?
Yeah, well, it was so decided. I got down to about 7 handicap myself, and then comes the thing, what are you going to do? And I went to talk about, I did business studies, I think, at Westminster College, and then I just heard about this chap called Mark McCormack in America, who had the big 3, with started with Arnold, obviously Arnold Palmer,
Famous handshake.
Yeah, and Gary Player, and then Jack Nicklaus. And I just thought that leisure seemed to be the thing of the future. People have less hours working, I'd read, and I took an interest. I thought, sport's got to be a huge business to go into. And cutting a long story, I'd met Nick Faldo at Royal St George's, funny enough. He knew a friend of mine. I'd met him in the early days, when he just turned pro, and that's when it was, and spoke to him. And then I wrote to Mark McCormack and to see if there was any positions, and I met with a chap called Ian Todd and James Erskine, and Ian Todd ran the European side. And Mark said, right, we'll give you a 4-month try and let's see how it goes. And
Really? It was that simple?
well, I wish it was.
letter.
I heard
it was,
you'd made quite a good pitch to Mark, though. When you say you wrote to him, I think we need to.
Well, I was trying
Wasn't
to.
just a
Let's put a bit
CV,
of colour into that if we can.
Well, I was trying to think. All of a sudden, it was getting a lot of exposure. IMG and Mark McCormack in particular, and I was trying to think how many people must be writing to him, and in those days, to be in sport or the music industry was the one everybody wanted to be in if you were young, and it was all happening, wasn't it? And so I tried to make it a bit different by, in the letter, very cheekily saying to him, I didn't think he'd go on much longer without me. And he must have thought, who is this idiot? And I want to meet him or whatever. But that's how I sort of met. And as I said, and I mentioned a couple of funny story about that, Mark had a very good sense of humour.
Did he? Yeah.
And when I had the 4-month trial, and I met him, and in those days there was a tennis company in management called ProServe that were thinking of getting into golf, and they did. And anyway, the 4 months was up. I hadn't heard. Mark was in this meeting with me, and he wasn't talking about it. And I was obviously quite worried to see what the result was going to be, whether I was in or not.
Yeah.
And he said, at the end, he said, you're probably wondering what we all think about your trial and where. So I was trying to be cool. I said, well, yeah, that's a thought. Yes. So he said, well, we think you've got a hell of a career in this sport, but we think it's with ProServe. And I thought went from up here right down into the depths, and he burst out laughing and said, welcome aboard. So that was basically the story.
And what year would this have been then? So
that was 78.
78. So at the time, did it feel like that whole industry around sports management, commercializing relationships, did you feel like you were sort of at the time almost creating the industry and
very much so? Well, Mark,
were you kind of making up the rules as you went along almost?
Absolutely. And some we got right most of the time, but you get some wrong, and that's how you learn. But the whole philosophy of what Mark had in those days, if you could sign the clients in golf, which he did, then create the events for them to play in, and then film them, which is where TWI came in, which is now the biggest in the world in sports films and everything, and TV, right? Then you've cracked it, and that's basically simply what it was.
That always part of the business model then?
Yes.
So that was always part of
once
thinking.
You got the clients.
It was never, it wasn't like, with retrospect, going, well, that was a bloody good idea, wasn't it? We've got the TV rights and the events and the relationships. It was, we want to have the whole enchilada, they would say,
brilliance, in thinking that one through and knowing where the business could go through. And if you look at Arnold and Mark, there's a big, strong suggestion that sport is where it is because of those two, the professional side.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's where it all came with, Arnold asking Mark, who was a lawyer, to look at his Wilson contract, I think it was. Not it was completely one-sided, but he realized that it was a lot of room needed for the client, as it were, to get a bit more out of it, and that's how he started.
For the athlete, and to take sort of centre stage, and I guess coming along with sort of the growth of TV, and that being in more and more people's homes. I mean, from what you're saying there, Mark, sorry, John, it kind of starts with the client first and foremost, and everything grows out of that. I mean,
correct.
In those early stages of your career, was it very hands-on, meeting a lot of these professional golfers and just trying to develop a rapport with them? I mean, what was that like?
I think it was. I think the whole thing is based around trust, and I think the big difference between IMG and many other companies and agents and all these different things, we manage people. So not only do we do all the merchandising for them, all the deals, we did all the day-to-day for their travel. We did all their financial day-to-day, and obviously then when they started making it, getting the right people in to do their investments. So really, in each sport, the idea what those sportsmen and women could get on with what they knew best, which was improving their game and being the very best they can be, and the rest they trusted to get on with. And I think that's the big issue. And But it's human nature, you know. If you make, we're all a bit like that. You make somebody a lot of money one year, and then they say, "Well, that was last year. What's happening next?" You know, it's the nature of.
Their
So it got more and more pressure to get more and more deals in, and then there was more clients, and we had some fantastic clients, and I was very lucky to start with Nick, Bernhard, and Nicky Price.
So those were your first three, were they?
So,
Really?
Wow.
You know, that was a bit of luck there, and I did try. And
you
Bernhard
won those on your own back. Sorry, those were they sort of people that you'd just gone out and hung around, spoke to people.
Well, Nick had already signed with
Mm.
IMG, but the others I was part of getting.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting that, you know, we had a lot of fun, a lot of trust. We're all young together. We're all the sort of same ages. And but whatever trust and fun that they had, or whatever friendship there was, you know, if you didn't come up with the goods, I was in no illusion that was the foremost. And the better they did, the more we had to go along with that and maximize everything for them. So it was great fun, and as I said, a lot of it, as you said, we made up as we went along.
I guess someone like, you know, just looking at Nick Faldo, where, you know, he had, was having a steady, you know, professional career to begin with, but then there's the journey of him reinventing himself with David Ledbetter, and then kicking on to absolute sort of stardom in the game and becoming a multiple major winner. That must have been, you know, thrilling to be part of that team, and to see that.
Also, the thing that impressed me always about Nick was the fact that he wanted to reach the perfection always the time, to be the very best. And he would narrow that down and what he had to do to get to that, and raise the barrier, what everybody else was doing, whether he, you know, the health side of it, the mental side of it, the eating side of it. And obviously, he realized, I remember he played in Augusta and was in the final group when Ben Crenshaw won. And he didn't obviously win, Ben Crenshaw won. And he was undoubtedly the best young player in the world at that point. And we drove together to Hilton Head. And I remember, as anybody would be, he was quite upset and shocked about what had happened. Not upset, you know, trying to think. And I said, listen, the great thing about what you're doing, Nick, you know, if you're a Formula One racing driver, which we had, they go out of bounds on a couple of holes. That could be the end of it, their career, let alone, you know, you've got this week, you start again, it's a fresh, you know. And he won at Hilton Head, And that's what impressed me even more, because it was a couple of weeks after that. I remember it vividly. We sat down, and he said he'd met David Ledbetter, and he said, I'm going to change my swing and work with David. And he said, I'm only kidding myself. I'm not good enough.
Really?
Did you, at that moment, being the sort of the bystander that's, you know, whereas you get Nick Faldo here, kind of a bit of a prize client, and he's all of a sudden started talking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Did you feel like saying, well, let's not be too rash here,
well,
Nick? Like,
it was
can we not just keep the sort of the...
Yeah,
you know, keep the
let's just get 1% better.
Yeah, like, let's all just stay the same.
Exactly.
Let's not.
And, you know, but there again, that's what impressed me about him.
Yeah.
He was like,
he knew it. And he was right. And a lot of the other pros, older ones, who maybe you would listen to, all said, what the hell is he doing?
Yeah.
What's wrong with his swing's great. What's he doing? Well, he knew. And who was right? He was 100% right.
Absolutely.
So that was kind of impressive, but it was a tough time because a lot of the sponsors, you know, left because he was one of the best young golfers in the world. Then he's missing cuts and he's changing his swing. And Pringle are the one company that stayed with him all the way through. They were brilliant,
didn't they?
Yeah.
And as a quite an interesting story that I could tell you,
yeah, please.
I think was very interesting was Carsten Solheim, who obviously started Ping and owned Ping. When Nick was going through this change, he said to me, look, I could make a set of clubs for Nick. He's talking about irons. And he's lost his club deal. No, you know, I would like to do it. And I said, look, fine. I said, but in those days, Ping would put a pool together of money and say to the guys, go and play for it. And I said to him, the trouble with that is you're not going to get the great players. Because
how do you mean? Sorry, I don't
So
follow.
they put a pool of money together, and all the players would play for that pool.
So depending on results based.
Where they finished. Yeah.
Okay, got you.
So if you're a superstar, it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Because you're saying, well, I don't need to be playing for, I need my money up front. Because
Yeah.
So anyway, he said to me that he really liked Nick, and he thought he would come through, and he said, I know I can make a set of irons for him. So I mentioned it to Nick, and Nick said, well, okay, what have we got? Tell him to make some clubs, which he did. And Nick, another set of clubs, changed this. Nick's a great perfectionist.
Yeah.
Change this, change that. And eventually he said that, I said, look, Nick, we've got to make some sort of decision because we can't keep going
5 sets of irons.
and Nick quite rightly said,
we're losing goodwill here.
yeah, the only way we're going to find out is if I put them into battle and put them in the bag and play with them, which he did. And in the European Open a couple of years later, he had them in the bag and he broke the course record, which was Nick back.
That was the sort of ringing endorsement.
Yeah.
Everything was back on track.
Huge.
Swing was there. The clubs.
And so waited till everybody had gone. It was at Sunningdale, and I went down with Nick, and he took a couple of, on the practice ground, a couple of clubs and a few balls. In those days, you had them in a bag. And watched it. He absolutely nailed them. Like, I only wish I could hit a golf ball like that, a 7-iron and a 4-iron, whatever, and just dead straight, absolutely perfect. Course record. And he handed them back to me and said, John, I'll never use those again.
No
So
way.
I burst out laughing like you guys. I thought it was quite funny, actually.
What?
And suddenly realised he was dead serious.
Really?
And he said, John, I can't work the ball with these irons.
Brilliant.
I don't see it as a straight shot, which I always thought all I ever wanted to do was hit a straight
Just try and
shot.
hit frozen ropes.
I
and
don't
that's
see it. I
it.
want to fade it. I want to hit it. And he said, all I can do is hit it one way. And he never played them again.
So was that the end of the Ping thing then
yes.
at that point?
That's
And was it
amazing.
Mizuno he then played
Yes.
for the rest
Wilson
of his...
first, and then
Wilson and then Mizuno.
And then Mizuno, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mizuno, as you know, Nick was they were a brilliant company to work with, and Nick was exactly perfect for them as well. And between them, he won all his majors with them.
What's that feeling like when you're working for whether it's one of your players and you're sort of sat there in the middle with all these commercial relationships going on around and needing to broker stuff? What's that feeling like? Because that must have felt quite, do you know what I mean? That there's a relationship on both sides, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
And that must be like quite hard to sort of wrangle with, I suppose, in your head at times, because it's, you've got to look out for one relationship, but then, do you know what I mean?
No.
I can imagine that must have felt just dreadful.
Well,
I go back to Carsten Solheim saying, sorry, the gig is up. Like I've
like
just
the
watched
good
him
and the
break
bad
the court.
news.
I
Yeah.
know he shot 62.
Shot 62,
But
but
amazingly,
they're just not,
he doesn't think they're right.
You can't
Yeah.
work these
But
things.
the thing is, when you think about it, yes, I couldn't, when he broke the course record, I just couldn't wait to get on the phone. And I thought to myself, can you imagine, or when he finished, what Carsten will be saying at this point? We're going to do the first major deal, where they're going to pay him return. It's going to be fantastic. But when you think about it, and the respect I had for Nick, in that he knew that he, at what he wanted to do with his game, he couldn't play with that. And yes, it was a bit of a shock, but he was absolutely right. And it's proof in the pudding, as they say in the cooking, when he actually got his Mizuno irons and could work the ball in 6 majors later.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I don't know if you feel this, Sam. I'm certainly, having been born in 1995, I kind of see golf just changing fundamentally when Tiger came along. And I guess there's an element of that might be true. But equally, when you hear these stories about Nick Faldo, actually the sort of the utter professionalism and the athleticism and just leaving no stone unturned that so many people of my generation associate with Tiger Woods was actually very much there and present with Nick Faldo long before.
Absolutely. And I would put Greg Norman in there.
Yeah.
And Bernhard. And what Tiger did, he raised the bar again. That's what it was. They raised the bar from the other side. And it's an interesting story. I don't know if you've played Chart Hills.
No, that's the course that Nick Faldo designed.
Nick designed.
Yeah.
So there was a sort of soft opening, as it were. The media were there, and it's a par 5 first hole, and the idea Nick would just do the press bit and then hit a drive, and that would be it, because the course wasn't totally finished then. So he hadn't practiced. He'd been, obviously he's come back from America, did the press stuff well. The owner was there, and TV crews from BBC, ITV, the whole bit. And so they said, come on, Nick, would you... So he tees up the ball, and one of the TV chaps, just as he's getting ready to hit, said, excuse me, Mr. Faldo, you haven't told us where the perfect drive would go. And I looked at him and I went, Nick said, good question, just over the second bunker with a bit of a fade on it, and depending on the drive, right side of the fairway. Okay, hit it, and it was just like unbelievably exactly what he said, and it landed precisely where he said it would land. So the chap said, all the crowd were going bananas, and this chap said, excuse me, Mr. Faldo, we didn't get that on the TV camera. Could you do it again? And the owner told me, whispered to, tell him to get lost, you can't do it. So Nick said, okay, hold on a minute. Is your camera working? It's TV camera. Yes, okay. And when you play Chart Hills, there's 2 perspex bits in the right-hand side of the fairway, 2.5 feet from each other.
Oh, really? You could throw
it's Nick's, it's Nick's drives.
And they've still got those?
Yeah, with the balls in the fairway.
Really?
2.5 feet between them.
Wow.
And you wonder why he was as good as he was.
That's remarkable stuff.
It is. And there's no luck there, is there?
No, well, no, I mean...
That's what you've got to get rid of. Everybody needs a bit of luck, but, you can't leave everything to luck. There's huge skill involved.
Bernhard Langer was also famously very, very precise and deliberate. I think there's the story that I love. Is Monty tells a story of, I think, playing in his first Ryder Cup and playing a foursome with Langer and Langer says, what was the distance from that sprinkler you walked past? He said it was like 95 yards. He said, was that from the front or the back of the sprinkler? I mean, I bet you must just have so many stories of that ilk, to tell about Bernhard too.
Bernhard was the nicest guy you could ever meet. And interestingly, when we actually signed him, many of the guys, again, the senior golfers around that you would often say, and clients, what do you think of this young German chap, Bernhard Langer? And couple of the top boys here said to me, anybody who's got the yips at 20 has got no chance in this game. You'll never...
Did he have it at that age? I knew he always suffered a lot with the putting. Even at the even in that age, you could tell he was really uncomfortable.
And then he won the under 21 at Casherel.
Yeah.
And then after that, it started... In fact, the first time I saw him, I think it was the Hennessy Cup, which was like Europe versus UK in those days, I think. And the reason he got in because it was another flag, Not that he was well known.
Yeah. Just another...
And basically, I saw him par 5. He obviously with Woodwards, and he drew this ball off this par 5 beautifully off the tee. Then hit a 3-wood and faded it onto the green about 14 feet, and he just holed the 4th putt. And you can imagine the greens weren't that fast, and they weren't.
Yeah.
But all the other pros, the 2 other pros, turned their back on him and couldn't watch.
Couldn't shake it in then in those days. There were periods where he just couldn't shake it in the hole. It's
really
incredible when you look at the longevity of his career.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's absolutely remarkable how
it is.
well he's
and
done.
When in those days, when I asked Ray Floyd once if he'd seen him, and he said, no, I haven't seen him, but I've heard about his putting, and that's not good. And he saw Bernhard on the practice ground that day, and this is obviously before Bernhard went to America for his first Bay Hill. We got him in and stuff, and he said, I've never seen him play, but he had then a 3-knuckle grip on his left side, and he said, all I can tell you, in my opinion, he'll never hit it high enough to play in America. Which I said to him a couple of times after a few more wins, after a couple of Masters.
These comments, they sound great at the time, don't they? But then they quickly come unstuck.
But he was an amazing guy and a lot of fun, Bernhard. But he was the one that was always had time for people,
really?
And worked extremely hard, as Nick did, and they all did. You don't get in those days as good as they got by just having a sort of having a talent. Talent then wouldn't get you anywhere. It was the beginning. It was all those other areas of, that came into it. Talent wouldn't get you through.
I suppose what you had to achieve back then as well was so much different. There had to be daylight between you and the rest of the pack, didn't there? Really to make it. I'm not saying. This sounds dreadful now, but you can make a hell of a career as a journeyman now, can't you?
Yes.
And I don't think that would have been the same in the late 80s and early 90s, really. I don't know what that means, but the names that you remember at those times, it's really the ones where there's clear daylight in front and they're winning majors, wasn't it? Really. So,
but those are such inspiring stories as well, because that you hear about the likes of Nick Faldo and particularly Bernhard Langer. Those stories you're telling there, John, like. He wasn't someone who you might have just picked out and said, this guy's an absolute phenom. He's, he's destined for great things because there's so much natural talent. He's just won everything. He's really had to apply himself and just through sheer grit and determination overcome some fairly significant barriers, in his game and stuff that you might not expect to see until much later on in someone's career. Just sheer determination to become the best.
Well, absolutely. And the other thing that in those days that came into it, the idea that as a IMG as a company, if you could manage the best people in a country, you think of Bernhard Langer in those days, golf was just getting going in Germany, and you would end up going to see the boss of a company because generally they just started playing golf. And what a country to get sponsorship from if you're number one in the country. And Bernhard was one of the best with sponsors. He was such a professional off the course. And so, he not only benefited from being a great golfer on the course, he had some outstanding associations off the course and was one of the best, people I think you could have been associated with.
Well, that was one of my questions. How did you go about at the time going and getting some of these corporate sponsors into the game? Because it would have been, you look at it now and you go, Rolex or Mercedes or whatever, that you kind of expect them to throw money at golf.
They're well established.
They're well established in the game. At the time, that wouldn't have been. So how did you go about doing? There must have been some.
I'll give you one example.
Here.
It shows you how ridiculous things can be. When I first went down to meet with Bernhard, and he was a client down in Anhausen, and where he lived. And I met his parents and his brother and his sister, a lovely family. And it was quite interesting. His dad was a bricklayer, and because he was a bricklayer, and Bernhard, they obviously were, hadn't much money between them. He couldn't join the club, so that's why he started caddying, because he, didn't have the money to join. And anyway, that side he got better and better. And I always think, funnily enough, why was Bernhard one of the best communicators as a professional sportsman? Maybe because when he became an assistant pro at 16 years old or whatever he was, I think 16, and the pro said to him, right, there you are there in the pro shop. By the way, if you want to make some commission, when the members come in, see if you can sell them those set of clubs. See if you can get them some new clothes. And that's where I think he learned how to deal with people. So it wasn't all given to Bernhard. He didn't have it. Exactly.
Every step of the way.
And I think the interesting one, this time I did go down there, and I was talking on the way back. I was just getting to Munich airport, and I saw a ready mix, concrete thing. And I thought, God, they're over here. I thought it was a British company. And I thought, hold on, his father's a bricklayer. And I said, oh, come on, I've got to try this.
Great to know. This is brilliant.
So I got back, and I remember I got through to a guy called Gerald Tyler, who was the marketing director of Ready Mix Concrete. And I said, look, I'd love to come and talk to you about this. And Bernhard Langer, well, sounds interesting. Anyway, I went into the lovely office and sat down, and this lovely tea served, and I thought, oh, God, this is really prim and proper. And before I left, we worked out a deal, and Bernhard was with them for 10 years and was associated to Ready Mix Concrete,
Wow.
and did all the days for them in Germany and here. And the link was the fact his father...
Yeah, but it makes sense, and it's like it's natural and authentic, I guess you'd say now in a content world and all this sort of stuff. But there must have been some that really flopped. Are there any that stick in your mind of being?
Oh yeah,
blimey, that was a disaster. I should never have done that.
And often against me. I remember when Mark and McCormack and Hughes Norton, who ran the golf in America then for IMG, said to me they just signed this young guy called Bill Rogers from Texas. And in those days, because there wasn't the worldwide television, you could play the Open and have a clothing deal just for UK.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you could go to Japan and have one there. And have
Sebi did a lot of that, didn't he? Had all sorts of different arrangements.
Because you could, And so anyway, they said, look, he's a new client. We think he's going to be really good stuff. And I said, this is early days, by the way, and my career, which was nearly the end of my career. And I thought, wow. So I'm in this meeting, cutting a long story short, with a British company that made gloves. And they were really nice gloves. And they said, we're looking to maybe... And I said, listen, I've got the idea for you. Bill Rogers is coming over. He's playing the World Match Play. He's in. And then, he's young, and I'm sure we could do a deal. No. Anyway, we worked the deal out. And I just couldn't get on the phone quick enough to tell Hughes that what a hero I was. I've just done this deal. And he said, Mark, have you ever seen Bill Rogers play? So I said, well, no, I haven't seen him on television. No. He said, he doesn't wear a glove. And I went, oh, no. So I had to go back to the poor glove. Listen, have I got news for you? This guy is up. And, of course, it added to the problem that Bill won the World Match Play and then went on to win the Open at Royal St George's.
Oh, of course, the same year.
Yeah, so it was I thought, oh, God. Anyway, so you win some and you lose some. But generally, it was all good. And I remember in those situations, one of the funny ones, early days also, was when Gary Player was coming over. Gary Player is just an amazing guy with the...
Sponsor's dream, right?
Oh, yeah. And Alistair Johnson, who looked after him at IMG, a Scotsman, said to me, look, if you get anything for Gary Player for the Open, he'll do it. He's a great... Which he is. So there was a rainproof company. And obviously the weather being inclement sometimes at the Open and the World Match Play, I thought I could get him which I did. And I said, do you want me to send the product to you to make sure that... No, Gary will be fine with it, no problem. So I thought, this is great. So anyway, he arrives. Let's do the thing. Deal signed. Let's get the press into the media, into the sort of merchandise tent, and he can meet all the people and take some pictures and So I said, great. So Gary puts this jacket on, and I thought, is it going to fit? Is it going to, the media are there. I was feeling a little bit touchy, in case he said, how could I play golf in this? And he said, it was brilliant. He said, has anybody got a golf club? So they rush. Oh, of course, the merchandise. Somebody rushes with a golf club. And he's got the jacket on, and he takes a practice swing. And he said, man, there's no swish. And I thought, oh, Christ, how do we get some of that? Thinking there was a problem, but it wasn't making a noise, so it was a positive. I thought it was a negative. I had to go and get some quick. But
there's no swish in the fabric, and you're going, Christ, can we get a bit of swish?
God, where do we get that from?
I love that. It's the life of John. Who's just, well, we can get more swish. We can get more swish into the product. There you go.
Very sincere.
Was there a massive feeling of like the game being very different? Because you were spending a lot of time, if I'm right, from when we've spoken before, across in the US and across over in Europe. Did you feel like there was always a really big difference in the game and the currency? I know before we came on air we talked about, you know, clubs in America, clubs in Britain. It feels like financially it's a very different game.
The whole thing
did you
was,
kind of get that when you were working at IMG? Or
what I got was obviously America and the size of America and the money. You sell one of these little bottles here and you're going to sell, you know, thousands in the States. The thing that I think really helped and stemmed with Sevi as well, who was a friend of mine, but I never managed Sevi. We tried, but his brothers managed him in those days. The thing that I just thought was extraordinary was that so many of them had come from nothing. You go to the practice ground, a tournament in the States in those days, beautiful, lovely weather, wonderful turf with no divots on it. Get on the phone by the thing, can you get my sandwiches ready? I'll be in a minute. I need a Coke. Oh, we'll send it out to you. And I remember Bernhard Langer and Nick and a few of the boys saying, you know, it's only a couple of years ago in Britain and Germany, whatever, we would hit on the practice ground and try and find a bit that didn't have divots and mud. Then we'd wipe off the ice and the snow and all the rest of it and go back and hit them again. From that to there, I think just gave them the edge, in my opinion, all the way. Being in the very best place they were to play golf.
Trappings just sort of gave them the ability to spend more time digging it.
Fight a bit harder.
I mean, Ronan Rafferty, I remember he came on the podcast a couple of years ago now, and he told a brilliant story about like if you were lucky enough to go over and play in the I don't know if it was what championship it would have been, but you go over to Florida, having been, you know, in his words, almost just getting by in Europe, and you go out and you'd almost like won, and it'd been worth the trip if you just got to the locker room and you found like 3 gloves and half a dozen golf balls. It was like, oh, what a luxury this is.
Exactly. And
they hand them out like Skittles there.
Oh, I know. But it's a whole different ball game, literally. And I think it's the reason that it all got as big as it did, and obviously following up with the successes in the Ryder Cup, was just giving them that edge all the time. I think.
I guess looking back now, do you think that some of the characters that we've just mentioned there, Sevi, Langer, Faldo, do you think that there was something about that time that kind of allowed those characters to flourish? I'm not sure if we maybe see as many of those sorts of characters in the game nowadays in the modern game. I don't know what's your take on that.
No, I think back, and I think one of the things that was around a lot was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and there's still the chaps in the game then who were maybe coming to them, but they would literally be the complete opposite of those chaps that would still go out and have a drink in the evening, and quite considerably, and you would, know who would be playing snooker and drinking in the evening, and who'd be in bed, or practicing their putting, on their bedroom carpet. And funny enough, they were the ones that started winning. It changed all the way.
You could see that, right?
Yeah, absolutely, you could see it. Yeah, and again, that's the time I realised that talent, which a lot of the guys had brilliant talent, but it wasn't going to get them anywhere now. You had to work at all the areas we talked about to become the best, and that's what they did, and they all raised the bar. And I just think they were ahead of the game. They really were. And I think it's an amazing time, actually, and I think I always remember greatly the fun that everybody had, and the almost the camaraderie. And you'd go to America. One thing that shook me once at one of the first tournaments, and all the players were staying in the same hotel, and you go to the dining room, and there'd be the superstars. I'm not talking about Arnold, but of that ilk, who'd won majors, sitting having dinner by themselves. With and all the exclamation mark, foreign players all having dinner together.
Yeah.
It's a big plus, that, and having fun together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, when you come around to the Ryder Cups, that sort of camaraderie that had been there, all
Absolutely.
season long, makes a lot of sense why, Europe were able to sort of turn the tide.
Absolutely correct, yeah.
Do you think we do beat out some of the individualisms, or some of the players have maybe become a little bit homogenized now over time? Do you think they've become a bit more, I don't know, just those characters don't seem to be as strong, do they? And it's not necessarily about drinking till late at night on tour or whatever, but I think there's a few players on tour now that are people really admire and like, and it seems because they give over a little bit of personality.
Like
Harry
Rory.
Higgs,
Rory's so
very
candid,
sort of like,
isn't he? In his
he's
interviews,
very
it
present,
seems.
isn't he, with the media and
Yeah.
honest. And I think a lot of the times we seem to beat that out of players at the moment, and I think that's probably a shame. You look at the decades gone by, and certainly your era a bit more perhaps. There just seemed a bit more of that, and that was...
Well, there's so many. I mean, there were some huge characters. I always talk about Simon Hobday, who died recently, but he won the Senior Open in America. I mean, he was a hell of a player, but he liked to party quite a bit. And his big problem with his game, because a great striker of a golf ball, was his putting. And apparently on the Seniors tour, I wasn't there, but in America. And they were in New Mexico, I think. And cutting a long story short, he's in the first round, and he's got a 2-shot lead with 3 holes to go in the first round, and 3 putts, 3 holes in a row. Next morning, he's out there, and he'd bought the biggest sombrero you could buy in Mexico, I think. It was huge, and so huge he had to tie it under his chin.
Really?
And people go on the putting green and said, "Simon, what?" Excuse me. And he carried. Then he went and practiced with it on, and then he teed off with it on. And anyway, cut a long story short, again, he all of a sudden he's gone back with a few birdies, 1 shot ahead of everybody. And the next hole, par 5, he 3 putts, and he throws the sombrero onto the putting green, holds his hands up in the air and looks up to the sky and said, "I thought you wouldn't have recognized me under here." Which, that's so funny, but can you imagine what would happen if
they
he
don't do it now, do they? It's the thing.
Probably a huge fine.
There's a great, I think it's a great clip of Seve at Wentworth where, someone's sort of fidgeting in his backswing. I think he's just sprayed it off the tee, and he's quite close to one of the galleries, and someone's fidgeting in his backswing. He backs off the ball, and he's like, "I know you're really nervous, but I'm nervous too."
I know.
And to do that in the heat of battle now, you just couldn't imagine that.
Well, I remember
nowadays.
we talked earlier about John Bland, who we used to manage, who died again. God, it's terrible to say that, but he died last week before, and of a short illness. But a great practical joker, and I remember there was always these jokes going on between a lot of people, and they would try and get one up on everybody. And I remember walking back after dinner in a hotel, and I think it was Dale Hayes' room. Dale was number 1 in Europe and won many tournaments. And he walked past his room and knew it was his room. And when you have the card outside with the menu for breakfast, still talking to me, he said, "Have you got a pen?" So I gave him a pen, and he scratched out 7 o'clock and put 6 o'clock in the morning and ticked both sides of everything on the menu.
Really?
And at 6 o'clock, 2 trolleys arrived for breakfast. I mean, just... that could happen and wouldn't happen now. Probably get sued for him not being in the great shape to win the tournament, and also probably for wasting food or something.
So good.
But I guess
probably Dale would have eaten it all, knowing Dale. He was a big boy.
He'd have gone round and helped John out with that.
Do you look at the? I don't know. Do you still go to things like it's the Open or some of the major events now? Do you go there and look around and go, "Blimey, it's really like, where do we draw the line now?" This is like these are such big enterprises now. I mean, the 150th we were very lucky to go to last year, and just the scale of it was quite hard, I think, to just get your head around. Right?
Yeah, it is. Well, I didn't go last year, but Royal St George's, I'm a member, I went there, and it is the scale of things. You're quite right, but it was all put in place. Luckily, the whole point, and IMG were heavily involved in that. When you think, IMG and Mark did the original deal for Rolex in those days, and also for Wimbledon, which is still a major thing of going forward. And the concept of obviously TV, which was huge, which was Mark again and TWI, and negotiating the sales of TV rights across the world. And obviously the thing that became very good was also selling at corporate hospitalities, which was another huge area of the Open and Wimbledon. But it was all done early days and sort of continued to grow.
The foundations were there, and then just as the games got bigger, it's just like, well, we just hook more into this now.
And you look where golf is growing in Asia.
Yeah, I was about to say,
and now on the ladies' side as well over there. I mean, it's all, and we can watch any tournament in the world now. At any time. So it's really grown dramatically, and I think some of the monies that are being thrown around, and obviously Live Golf coming into it, and then the new structure they've got in America with putting more prize money into the events. It's an interesting time.
We've got to ask about the Live Golf stuff, because I'm guessing you would have been around the same time as that sort of Greg Norman attempted coup back in the day. Would you have been there when this was when the pieces of paper were going under the players' doors and stuff at night? Did it feel like maybe seeing this all play out over the last couple of years was something, did you sort of feel like, well, I could have seen that happening 30 years ago?
We always talked about a world tour IMG, which effectively it became, because we were creating events all around the world. But, there's always two ways of looking at all this. But, competition is actually key in everything we do. And I can see both sides, but I could see the fact that with you look in the older days, or even now, if you create a new event or create a new tour, you first will have to get the players, then you get the TV and the sponsors because of the TV. Now you don't. You've got the players, and the rest will fall into place because you've got backers who will cover it. And I think it's quite interesting. A couple of questions. This Lives Golf happened, and we know the guys that have gone there. I know some of the younger generations, and my son James really have enjoyed watching it and seeing it. And there's a place for it. And I think that what happens in the future, hopefully, is that people talk, which is what has to happen in these situations. And luckily the majors have made their decision of getting them in. I suppose the big problem is to think, at IMG we started the world ranking, the Sony World Rankings, but you need something like that to make sure that the guys who are in the Live Tour can play the majors. It's quite interesting in Augusta, wasn't it, that two of them finished second.
Yeah, and it looked for a while.
It looked very close.
It was a good week.
It's funny though,
very, very good
it
week.
Seems like it's almost normalised, although it's been, it's not even been a year since the first event at Centurion. Was it last June when we were there? But things are, it seems like it's starting to normalise, and people are just sort of accepting it now as being part of the golfing landscape, whereas at the time it was like absolute uproar. I can't believe what's going on. This is just a total upheaval of the game. But actually, I guess it's just gradual evolution. There's been iterations of this in the past with Arnold and Jack Nicklaus breaking away, I think, from more sort of traditional Professional Golfers Association in America to forming the PGA Tour. And Sam, you just mentioned Greg Norman's initiative in the 80s and 90s. So I guess, as you say there, like competition is just inevitable.
It is,
and it's just it's just natural that people are going to compete if they think that they have a better, hate to use the word product, but I guess that's essentially what it is, a better viewing experience, or something that athletes enjoy playing in more, and that's where Live has naturally, come from.
And I do think that, it's looked at sort of looking about the next generation, younger generations, and what they actually want out of the game. And the music side, the concerts, it's all
social media.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Big following, actually. And they've come up with some very good ideas, I think. But, you know, it's interesting. If you said to many of the guys that I knew who were very successful, they wanted to be known as how many majors they won, not how much money they made.
Yeah.
You win the majors, the money happens. And I think that's the thing that I always hope that they'll be able to play the majors, because at the end of the day, after the career, I don't think we'll look back and say somebody won, you know, X tens of millions or hundreds of millions, whatever.
Legacy, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think to actually win major tournaments under pressure against the world's best is the one that I think the great players have always wanted. And Arnold's a classic example of that, and Jack, and they knew everything. And Gary would come in once they, you know, won the majors. Yeah,
they've remained, I guess they've been established for so long now as being, the four most important events, and that's what someone's career is judged by. Although, interestingly, I think quite a few people would say that Arnold Palmer had an instrumental role in restoring the Open to being such a significant championship, in that it was dwindling and maybe Americans weren't seeing it as an event that was worthy of coming over and playing. And, you know, Arnold coming back over and you know, showing how important it was to him really sort of got it back on the radar.
100% right. Absolutely correct. Very much so.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, with Mark's help and advice, it was a pretty good move for all of us.
Really?
I'm sure. Yeah.
So that was something that was planned out between Mark
Mark
and I.
realised the importance of the majors.
He saw the history of the event.
He could see that.
Yeah.
He was like, we need four. We've got to, you know, and it was already sort of preordained. We've just got to make sure we invest in this. This has got to be a big product, because that's going to be
the oldest
European
major
market.
in the world. You know, it all started, and you know, Arnold definitely was one of the major reasons its success that it is now, and Mark.
Yeah, because he had to qualify as well. Like, it seems nowadays, like, could you imagine arguably the best player of his time having to come back, you know, or go to a foreign country, having been based in America for his sort of regular season, and actually go through sort of regional or final qualifying to play in this event. But you look at, you know, what that's led to nowadays, it's pretty remarkable.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Segue into Lytham. Open Championship venue this year, Simpson Cup. A massive part of what you're doing at the moment with the Simpson Cup and the On-Course Foundation. I think we've got to start talking about this. When did all this stuff start for you? What year did you sort of...
It was 2009 when I visited Headley Court.
Yeah.
And then started the charity in Britain in 2010. And then in 2012 or 13 we started in America. And you need, obviously, different trustees, different charity, although it's still called the On-Course Foundation, USA, different trustees. And, you know, right now in this country, we've had just over 1,000 members, as we call them, over here.
Yeah.
We've got many into employment, over 250 in some forms of employment.
Really?
And we just took, funny enough, last week I went to Orlando from New York for a couple of days, and we had 10 Brits and 10 Americans there for a week to you know, for intensive playing and coaching and playing some lovely courses there.
Oh, brilliant!
And one of our guys, Dave, who when he joined us, said that he would like the idea of working outside, and we got him, funny enough, work experience at Royal Lytham.
Right.
As a greenkeeper, and he did his 4 or 5 months, and brilliantly, I would say, and they employed him. A couple of years after that, there was they had some machinery that the secretary had rented for the course, whatever, and it broke down, and they were waiting and to get it fixed, and David said, "I can fix that."
With his military background and knowledge of
whatever.
Just knows again.
Which he did. And I'm pleased to tell you, he's now in charge of all machinery at Wentworth Golf Club.
Really?
Wow.
And that's come from him time in hospital and recuperating, and he's also a very good golfer. He plays off 6 or 7 handicap. And that's what we do, get them employment, and after they've got their confidence and all the sort of bits that go with that.
Yeah.
Is it a hard sell to get people into golf? Do you find within people that ex-servicemen that have been wounded in battle or whatever? Does it feel like have you lost the room before you started? Because it's like
what
when
does
they
that
play
look
golf,
like?
how does that get received?
It's like it's again the countries. No, because I think the great thing about employment is that in golf, there's golf courses in every town or around every town, every city in the country, and that means part-time and full-time term employment. The golf manufacturers have taken us on board, like Callaway, and we've had a few guys working for them, and also many of them in the States work for Callaway and other companies. There's a big difference, though. In America, if you leave the military injured, you become a veteran, and there are veteran hospitals, which there are none of those here anymore. No military hospitals here. And the Americans actually, I'm sure you're aware when you've been there, think very highly of their military. And
Veterans Day and the national celebration.
And they come into the airport. They've got now their own lounges in airports, and they get applauded. They wear their uniform everywhere they go. And
it's a massive contrast.
Yeah, and I think also, it's easier to raise money there, apart from America, because of the tax situation for benefit, for giving money to charity.
Oh, they got the huge.
But we just do it in a much more understated way. But at the end of the day, the most important thing for me with employment, you're not asking for charity. You're asking for a job for people that can do the job better than anybody else. Yeah. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. These guys don't want pity. They want the chance of proving themselves to be the very best they can. And that's exactly what they do.
I guess it comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, where they're at that crossroads where they don't want to feel sorry for themselves and people to take pity. They're like, okay, this is not a great situation that I find myself in, but I'm going to absolutely make the most of it and apply myself. And golf gives them that opportunity.
Yeah, very
both
much
playing it and also the employment opportunities within the game, which is so varied.
Yeah, and I think that it's very interesting that with all the thousands that have been through now the charity, and I haven't heard either in America or here anybody complain about an injury or situation they're in.
No.
Even though they might be struggling. It's that whole point. They don't want that to come into anything. They just want to do the very best they can, and they almost accept what's happened to them, because they knew that going into the military. There might be a war, or they might be called up. They might, So their attitude is amazing. The other thing I must say, which I love, apart from that professional side, is the humour.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm sure I've seen people say, "Oh my goodness, you can't say that." No, we can. I've got no legs, mate. I can say it. But it's great humour, and I think that when you're either physically injured or suffering from PTSD, to be back with your comrades, number one, and it's almost like a family from before, and if you are feeling a bit down, or you realize there's probably people that are worse off than you. You can easily say that, but you can see it when it's like that, and they will never let you get down, because they'll bring you up, because they've all been through it.
Yeah,
we all have. And I think, the thing that I think brings it back to me is simply, when these injuries have happened, a lot of them, the medical they received, a few years before, they would never have lived, because of where it all is. The medical people are on the helicopters. They've got that one very important
trauma
hour.
Surgery anyway, anywhere now. It's just remarkable.
So they get the very best. Then the sort of rehab side of it, the very best. And some of these legs that I'm sure you've seen, the above knee legs are computer driven. Some of them are hundreds, thousands and thousands of dollars to buy, and they get them when they need them. They walk brilliantly, and then they say, "Right, sorry about all this." Tap on the shoulder. thanks for everything, goodbye.
Mm.
And especially in America, back to the very place often you were trying to get away from. And now you're back there.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
And often with great respect, with the size of America, people of your age, of 23, I know one of our guys, a girl came up to him at a party and said, "Excuse me for asking, but, you know," he had one arm, and she said, "Was this a car accident?" And he said, "No, actually, I was in Afghanistan." And she was 22, it turns out. "What, you were driving in, what? No, I was serving." No idea.
Yeah.
No idea. That's your own age group.
Mm.
So, you know, you can understand why golf really has helped that with the On Course Foundation. And, you know, the horrible statistic in America is that we're just under 4 million injured servicemen and women. On average, 22 commit suicide every day. You know, that to me...
It's dreadful. It's people falling between the cracks and just being
And
forgotten.
the size of America.
And I guess...
Is that a similar picture in England or UK?
Well, no one really knows. It does happen, and we have a lot of our guys say that over here that they have friends that committed suicide, and recently. But because when you leave the military, you then become a civilian, it's difficult to know whether you were in the military or not, if you know what I mean. Where in the States, you're a veteran.
Like a clear accounting model for it, which sounds ridiculous, but...
Exactly. But, you know, we all find it very... it's a difficult thing to say, but when someone comes up to you and, you know, that you know and you've helped, and they're now playing good golf, and they look you in the eyes and tell you that the On Course Foundation saved their life.
Yeah.
You know, it hits home.
I bet, yeah.
And you know what? We did. Often the way, I mean, one guy actually told me in America recently that he actually worked out where he was going to do it, when, what. I mean, you're looking and go, oh my goodness,
that's really,
me.
yeah, that's...
It's
because
horrific.
they've received all this amazing sort of, I guess for want of a better description, like the physical care and rehabilitation, the amazing hospital facilities that are there to not only just save their lives and provide this trauma surgery, but then all the rehab. But then I guess emotionally, there's maybe not as much support, or really no support.
Well,
for them.
especially with
so,
you know, you go back to mid-America in the middle of nowhere,
and what is there for them?
Yeah, and I was shaken. Actually, this last trip, one of the Americans told me that he's now lost more of his people in his unit from suicide than were actually killed in action.
That right, that's
and that shook me rigid.
Unbelievable.
Which was 10, by the way. 1 unit. And young. Hard to understand, isn't it? You just can't get to grips with it. But all I know is that it's really helping.
You see a massive benefit with the guys that come through that. And some of
Huge.
them playing great golf, they're going into new careers in industry that they hadn't dreamt of. You know, the man at Wentworth, he never dreamt that would be something, but it's like he's got the perfect skill set for it.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess, you know, part of the On Course Foundation now, the Simpson Cup, I guess to bring it back to what you were talking about earlier, John, with the camaraderie and this sort of great banter that there can be and how they can lift one another up. I mean, it must be quite great to see the competitive element, you know, with very accomplished golfers, ex-servicemen. Is it 12 from Great Britain and Ireland?
13, because we have one that just plays the singles. You know,
so 13 aside, Great Britain and Ireland against America. I mean, I guess some of these men, we don't think about it, I guess, initially, but they might have served with one another or spent time overseas in Africa, you know.
Well, the thing is, it was actually absolutely spot on there, and I do remember one of the guys saying, you know, we fought together. It's always the Brits and the Americans, and foremost, I know the Canadians and the Aussies, New Zealand, fine, but they're the two that always seem to get stuck in these places. We fight together. We've been injured together. Sometimes we've had people die around us, and we never see each other again.
Yeah.
So to have them play, and I think the thing I love about it is, yes, are they competitive when it comes to the matches? Of course they are. But the fun and the camaraderie and being back together with like-minded people really makes my day on the whole thing. And as I keep repeating, the fun is amazing.
And I mean, looking at the film from, was that last year's? You're a bit of a celebrity over in America.
Yes.
You said you get spotted in customs going through. You're the guy from the Charles Schwab commercial or whatever, and you had like a famous face. But it's a brilliant film, and the pageantry around the event and stuff. And you look at it and go, bloody hell, this is a serious.
I'm obviously not military.
Not messing around here.
Yeah, my father was a fighter pilot, and he was a Spitfire and Hurricane pilot, and got the DFC, and then stayed in jets afterwards. And my mother was actually a dental nurse in the RAF as well. But I never, obviously because of my leg, I never did that. But it was quite interesting. I don't care where you're coming from, but to see those guys and girls stand to attention for the national anthems at the Simpson Cup, I tell you,
quite emotional.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to attention. And one of our guys in the States is a triple amputee with both legs high up and one arm, plays off 15. And to see him standing to attention with the rest of them, it just adds to what they're all about, and the pageant, the history, and the fact that whichever way we look at it, the politicians have sent them there, and they've done all this to help us at the end of the day. That's why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And the terrible result is what happens afterwards. The crunch.
So if there's the Simpson Cup's happening at the back end of September this year at Lytham, and that's going to be an annual thing every year. And there's some, unbelievable places it's been and will continue to go, no doubt.
So 1 year in Britain, 1 year in America.
So every time. Every time. I suppose if people wanted to get involved, support, help out, donate, we'd point them towards the website, the
EnCourseFoundation.com will tell you all about it.
And there's quite a few charity auctions and stuff, isn't there?
Oh, yes, we do.
The four balls and all this sort of stuff.
There's make quite a lot of money from that.
One of the clubs we help out, saw the On-Course Foundation be in touch, and I was like, oh, crap, we should absolutely do this. And it's actually, it's a well-oiled machine. It's straight through within minutes. They're straight on it, and there's money in the ringers for it. It's a great cause.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we've never had any help from governments, interestingly. So, and with my background, I think with IMG really helped that let's just get on and raise the money ourselves. And golf is a great area to do that, But
you're a modest guy. That's not your opening gambit, is it? You just sort of go in and talk to them about it. You're not there leading with the charge with the IMG stuff.
But it is amazing that the following you have. And it's interesting that I thought it was quite interesting when you look at doing the 2 or 3 day events that we do around the country, introduction to golf for them, and then the lessons and coaching going forward. When we first started it, you'd pick up the phone, or I did, to the golf club, and they'd say, oh, yeah, okay, sorry, it's a charity. Yeah, it's called... No, okay, we give 10% to charities. If you want something, tell... You then do that. Our guys and girls would turn up. They would see what we were. Before we left, they would say, would you like to do this next year? By the way, now the green fees are comped. The buggies are comped. All you've got to do is pay for the food.
Yeah.
And so from our expenses actually dropped in the second or third years.
Yeah, well done.
Because clubs started to realize what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if we can then get employment at those clubs for some of our guys, then we've cracked it.
That's amazing to hear. Yeah, just how it almost goes full circle there, and that you've been able to go and show these clubs just the brilliant work that the On-Course Foundation is doing, and then for that On-Course Foundation to also benefit the clubs in that there'll be people coming through who will go into, you mentioned the chap earlier up at Lytham, and then over to Wentworth to fix the machines. It's awesome to hear.
No, it's great to see, and it's gives so much pleasure to see the guys. I used to love going. Obviously, I can't do them all now, but when in the early days when we got to the rehab centres, and they realised what we were doing, and they said, "Oh, we'll send you a few guys," and they were ordered to come down. Can you imagine? To a golf course. None of them played golf.
What's this about?
Yeah. What a great start.
And we just wouldn't say, and our great pros that we have teaching them would say, "This is what we're going to do." And then you get a guy like Mike Brown, for example, in those days, has now turned pro, and won the Irish Open on the European Tour the other day, and hits a ball 250 yards straight down the middle. And these guys look at each other. We've got a double amputee playing on 4, and they're going, "Goodness me." And it's without question, which is extraordinary to me, without exaggerating, in the first morning session, everybody will hit the wow shot.
Yeah, that one
and you
shot.
know what that means.
Yeah.
It's the moment you're hooked, isn't it? You've
Gone,
sort of like,
finished,
that's
got
it
them.
then.
And they can't stop.
Yeah.
And that's what really...
So you get them, and you like they're going to get it. Like every morning, like everyone's got that one. And
You get one dead out the middle of the face, and that'll be it. Yeah.
And who would have ever thought of them lying in bed with their injuries and then the rehab, knowing as they thought it was the end of their sport as they knew it. And it was. It is. But hold on, there's a sport you can play competitively on a level playing field and with a chance of getting to the point where you can represent your countries again in the Simpson Cup. And the Simpson Cup is really is there to raise money for the On-Course Foundation, raise awareness for it, and also give the guys and girls something to work towards, to represent their countries again and be the very best they can.
Well, we're really looking forward to going in September. Another team event happening in September as well, the Walker Cup, which we're looking forward to going. So we'll be...
September is a full golfing month.
And the Ryder Cup as well, yeah.
Well, yes, true. We'll be that one in person, but I think if we are, the marriages will be on the ropes by then.
Oh, gosh,
John, thank you so much for giving us your time, allowing us into your home, talking to us and being so candid. And wonderful stuff. And really enjoyed that. And
well, thank you very much, both of you, for coming, and thanks to Andrew as well for
we should say Andrew. Andrew's our only regular listener of this podcast, so this is really a sort of a private audience
for putting us in touch, and we're looking forward to seeing you at Royal Lytham on the 24th.
Absolutely, if not before.
It's been a blast. Thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Watch this.